to be sorted. Okay, just a few words about Channukah, and then the discussion that we're going to have today. Channukah and Purim are the two, until the modern era at least, the two post-Tanakh Jewish festivals. So there's no Masechet in the Mishnah. There's no Masechet in the Mishnah that talks about Channukah. Just in terms of Jewish history, I was actually learning this yesterday with my daughter. There are various programs. If you want to test a Jew's general knowledge, a good question to ask them is, which story happened first, Channukah or Purim? Does anyone know the answer?
Purim.
Yes, excellent. So the Purim story happened after the destruction of the first temple, before the building of the second temple, and the Channukah story that we're going to be discussing today occurred in the middle of the second temple period. So it's after the Tanakh was completed. So we're a time not of the prophets, not the time of the Nevi'im, but the time of Chachamim. Channukah happened at the time of the writing of the Mishnah. The Mishnah was, it wasn't compiled until after the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash, but the rabbis were already teaching at the time of the Channukah story, and then subsequently it was compiled into the Mishnah. But there's no Mishnah talking about Channukah, but Channukah does appear. There's about 2 daf, very roughly, in Masechet Shabbat that talk about Channukah. This week we're going to look at one little section of that Gemara, and next week, Bezrat Hashem, we're going to look at one other section of the Gemara. But there's very little mention of Channukah in the Mishnah. There is only one mention that I'm aware of in the Mishnah on Channukah, and that is in Masechet Bava Kama. I think it's in Bava Kama. There's a Mishnah in Bava Kama that talks about if somebody is going in a public area and you knock over other people's stuff. You're walking in a public area and you knock things over that belong to another person. Are you liable? Are you not liable? On the one hand, you should be liable because you destroy someone else's property. On the other hand, it's in a public area, so they shouldn't be leaving their stuff in a public area. So in general, if somebody leaves stuff in a public area and you knock it over, you are liable. The person who left it is like, you shouldn't be leaving your stuff outdoors. But there's one exception that the Mishnah gives, and that is if somebody leaves a Channukah just outside their apartment, someone else, and just outside, their shop, if they leave a Channukah, then that's sort of reasonable and expected that people will be leaving a Channukah out at that time. And if somebody were to knock it over, then the person travelling on the main road should have been aware that this is a time for Chanukiot. So that's the only mention of Channukah in the Mishnah. There's not really the laws of Channukah, but the Gemara in Shabbat does talk about the laws of Channukah. So we're going to look at a little piece of Gemara now. It's in source number 1, and the question we're going to be talking about is, if the laws of Channukah, if everything about Channukah started after the Tanakh was concluded, so then who under whose authority? It can't be a mitzvah to oraita. It can't be a biblical commandment to celebrate Channukah, because none of Channukah happened. None of it is mentioned anywhere in the Torah or in the Nevi'im or in the Ketuvim. It's not mentioned anywhere in the Tanakh. So what's the basis of our obligation to celebrate Channukah? You follow? That's really the question. We're going to look at 2 opinions. Okay, so this is a command. You see in source number 1, Channukah lights. When were we commanded? Under what authority are we commanded? Oh, shalom aleichem. How are you doing? Hananya, what a joy to see you. Okay, here we go. The Gemara says like this. Amar Rav Chia. Oh, thank you. Omer Rav Chia bar Ashi, Omer Rav, Hamadlik ner shel Channukah tzarich levarech. When somebody lights Channukah lights, you have to make a bracha, right? Rav Yirmiyah Amar Haroeh ner shel Channukah tzarich levarech. And then Rav Yirmiyah says, not only if you light, but even if you just see a ner Channukah. And then the Gemara discusses, what bracha do you make if you see a Channukah? What bracha do you say if you light a Channukah? We're not going to go into that discussion now. What we are going to look, if you go down to the bottom of this source, the Gemara asks, Mai mevarech. What bracha do you make if you are lighting Channukah lights? What blessing do you make? And the Gemara says this, Mevarech, do you see this? It's 2 lines up from the bottom on source number 1. Mevarech asher kitshanu b'mitzotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Channukah, which means we say, blessed are you Hashem, who sanctified us with his mitzvot. God sanctified us with his mitzvot, and God commanded us to light the Channukah lights. Do you see that? Lahadlik ner shel Channukah. Now, the Gemara asks a very good question. Heichan tzivanu, where did God command us to light Channukah lights? Let's say Shabbat. How do we know we need to keep Shabbat? Because God on Mount Sinai told us, Zachor Yom HaShabbat, keep the Shabbat day. How do we know that we are supposed to fast on Yom Kippur? Because God told us, God spoke to Moshe, and God told Moshe that this is how you're supposed to keep Yom Kippur. It tells us about Matzah on Pesach, tells us about Sukkot, tells us about the Arba Minim, all of the mitzvot, every mitzvah in the Torah, I know because God commanded Moshe. The question is, how can I say that God sanctified us and commanded us to light the Channukah lights? Where did God command us? Because, as we said, Channukah is a post-Tanakh mitzvah. You hear the question? Now, this question is focused on Channukah, but of course, it's a bigger question of like rabbinic authority. Like when we know that we follow the advice of the Rabbi, so it's really asking a broader question of what's the basis of rabbinic authority. You hear the question? We're choosing to discuss it on the topic of Channukah, but it's really a much more exciting question, even bigger than just a question of Channukah lights. You follow? Now the Gemara gives 2 answers, and we're going to really spend our conversation today discussing these 2 answers. Heichan tzivanu, do you see this? Now we go to the bottom line. Rabbi Avia Amar. So the first opinion is the opinion of Rabbi Avia, and he says, based on the words from the verse Lot Asur. What does that mean from the words Lot Asur in Devarim chapter 17? So if you go into source number 2, guess what? It is that pasuk from Devarim chapter 17 verse 11. Yud Zayin Yud Aleph. And the Torah tells us, Al Pi Torah, according to the Torah, Asher Yorucha, that the rabbis will teach you, V'ala Mishpat, and according to the law, Asher Yomru Lecha, that they will say to you, Ta'aseh, that's what you should do. Lo tasur, do not deviate. Min hadavar asher yagidu lecha yaminu small. Do not deviate from that which they tell you to do, neither right nor left. So this is a clear command in the Torah that we are required to listen to what the rabbi. If there is a rabbinic edict, we are required to listen to it. When Chazal told us, created decrees, so we are bound to keep them, even though they're not explicitly in the Torah, and we're required because of this verse. That is the opinion of Rabbi Avia. Rabbi Avia clear? So, what Rabbi Avia is saying is in the Torah, God gave rabbis authority, And based on the authority that the rabbis were given in the Torah, they established the festival of Channukah, and therefore when we light on Channukah lights, we can say we are sanctified by you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because we are following we're indirectly following your will. You hear that? Okay, that is opinion number one. And then we're going to spend a few minutes discussing number one. And now let's get to opinion number two. And then we're going to have a very interesting discussion about what they arguing about. What's the difference between the ways that they view our relationship with Chazal? You hear? That's the first one. That was Rabbi Avia. The second position, and there are only two, but the second position is Rabbi Nehemiah. Do you see Rabbi Nehemiah? Rabbi Nehemiah Omer, Sha'al avicha v'yagetcha zekenecha v'yomru lach. Now this is from Parashat Ha'azinu. Do you see what the first one was? Perek Yud Zayin, Parashat Shoftim, which is towards the end of the book of Devarim. But Parashat Lamud Bet, this is chapter 32, is really almost at the end of the book of Devarim, and the Torah tells us, Zechor Yemot Olam, remember the days of old, Binu, the wisdom Shanot Dor Vador, the wisdom that comes with generation, the years that pass. And then the Torah tells us, Sha'al avicha, ask your father, v'yagetcha, and he'll tell you, Zekenecha, ask your elders, v'yomru lecha, and they will say to you. You hear that? In other words, we have a command, a requirement to listen to our parents. Now, this is like a connection to Jewish tradition. You follow? Okay, that's the second position, the position of Rabbi Nehemiah. Joy? So we have one is Lot Asur, do not deviate from the rabbis, and the second one is Sha'al avicha, ask your parents. Okay, everyone clear so far? Okay, the big question is, what are they arguing about? What's the machloket? Why does Rabbi Avia say what he says? Why does Rabbi Nehemiah say what he says? What's the world view, let's say, that leads Rabbi Nehemiah to say his, and what's the world view that leads Rabbi Avia to say his? You hear the question? Okay. מה אתם חושבים? What do we do without Yosef? Didn't you miss Yosef, Yov?
Yeah.
Just checking. Do you see they're different, right?
Can we repeat the question again?
I'm interested to explore together what's the argument? What's the difference between these two psukim, really? Do you see any? I mean, when Rabbi Nehemiah heard the pasuk of Rabbi Avia, what did he not like? And when Rabbi Avia heard, they both knew the whole Torah, right? So when Rabbi Avia, came along and said, Lot Asur, do not deviate, and Rabbi Nehemiah said, whoa. No, that's not it. It is Sha'al avicha, right? And then when Rabbi Nehemiah says Sha'al avicha, Rabbi Avia, whoa, Lot Asur. So I don't know if the right thing says what's missing in each one, or what's the emphasis that force one to like one pasuk and the other one to like the other pasuk. That's really what I'd like to think about for a minute.
Explain Sha'al Avicha again.
Sha'al Avicha is like the Sha'al is to ask your father,
Right.
and he will tell you. And then ask the elders, and they will say to you, which is really, I suppose, telling us to commit to traditions. There are some important differences that could help you a little bit here. The first verse, is written in Parashat Shoftim in a legal section of the Torah. There's many mitzvot. Within the context of the many mitzvot in Parashat Shoftim, Shoftim is about creating judges, various important halachot. So it's written within a legal section. If I was to, if each pasuk was in a different part of this library, so this is the legal section. You've got the Shulchan Aruch, the Torah, So then that posuk would be there. Do not deviate from what the rabbis tell you to do. That's a law, right? However, Sha'al Avicha, Parshat Ha'azinu, as you may know, is a poem. The whole of, do you remember at the end of the Torah, there's one, that parsha that is so one is taken from a section of the Torah which is poetic. Ask your father and he'll tell you. That's why it's not as, I don't know what the word, like it's harder to reduce it to a principle because he's talking, it's describing, it's a poetic piece of Torah. And the first verse is coming from a more legal section of the Torah.
Yeah, Rabbi seems like a really cut and dry, straightforward type of person. The logic follows very bashat, and I think he would have a problem with the other quote because it doesn't really enforce that it's like a commandment from Hashem. It kind of seems like it's like carry on the minhagim of your fathers, like you're gonna say a bracha that's vitzivanu, then how does this quote from Ha'azinu help that? I mean, how are you? I don't see the connection between asking your fathers and your elders and being commanded by Hashem, whereas the other one it makes a lot of sense,
Yeah, your point is excellent. I mean, I can understand if it's a commandment, it has to come from a legal section, right? Excellent. You will. The truth is, we're going to spend a few minutes looking at each one separately. As if you have a look, part one over here, legal source, and we're going to look at various positions that followed Rabbi Avia, and I think it's very, very much connected to what you're saying over here. Is like, what is Channukah? Is Channukah like is it a halacha? Of course. I mean, it's a halacha. If you look in Shulchan Aruch, there's Hilchot Channukah in the Shulchan Aruch. But am I fulfilling a mitzvah or am I maintaining a tradition?
Right, exactly.
So I think you'll see that the views of Channukah that might be reflected. I mean, it could be a reflection of how each of them sees what Channukah is. Yeah. Your point is excellent. I'll add to you, but you were probably thinking this, but I'll just mention that Lot Asur means do not deviate from the rabbis. So it's presented as a warning. Don't do something. But Sha'al Avicha is saying do something. Listen to your parents or listen to your teachers. You follow just what the framing is. Avoid doing something wrong. You see, I mean, which may be a more legal framework because that's about making sure you keep to the rules. You follow. Don't do this. Don't do that. Sort of relationship to Channukah, as opposed to ask people, connecting to a tradition, which is the second piece.
Are these two like the same?
What do you mean?
Like the same argument? Because when they say ask your father, it pertains to we all know that when they say father, it's also relates to the rabbis.
I'm so happy you asked that question. What's the difference between a father, avicha, and zekenecha, your elders? Nachon, because it says sha'al avicha v'yagetcha zekenecha v'yomru lach. So I'm not going to answer your question. I'm just going to tell you something very cute.
Okay.
But I was wondering whether to say it, but now your question sort of helps me get to it. So the truth is, my father is really following my family tradition, right? Mm-hmm. But I suppose in a place where there's no family tradition, or in a complicated area where it's not clear what the family tradition is, so then we defer to the position of the elders, not just the parents. You follow? But notice the verbs. The verb to describe my interaction with my father, Sha'al Avicha, ask your father, the Yagetcha. Yagetcha is from the root Hagad, like Haggadah. And in English, that would be to tell, like to tell the stories. Sha'al Avicha, the Yagetcha. The root of that word Yagetcha is Lahagid, like to say, to tell. Hey, Lahagid. It could be Yud Gimel Daled. Nachon Yaged. However, if you speak to the elders, Zekenecha, they don't v'yagidu lecha. The verb used to describe the answer of the elders is different. They're not going to tell me, they're going to say to me. Do you see that? V'yomru lach. Do you see that the verb, when my parents speak to me, they tell me the answer, but when I speak to the elders, they say to me the answer. What's the difference between somebody telling me something or somebody saying something to me? So the Netziv, Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, in his commentary on the Torah, I don't think it's here, called the Ha'mek Davar, he says that when I tell you something, it's really me speaking to you. And if I were to tell it to somebody else, I might tell it differently, because a parent, when they speak to the child, it's a very sweet idea. Their mama is speaking to that particular child. You know, if somebody, like in your, like your many siblings, so your parents might say, when one child asks a question, so then this child, they'll answer the question this way. The next child, they may answer the same question, but in a different way, because it will be molded towards that particular child. You follow Sha'alavicha. If you ask your father, he'll tell you meaning dafka you. However, if you ask the elders, they might not know you as well personally. They'll say the answer, and the way they say it to you will be the same they say it to somebody else. You follow? It won't be tailor-made answer in the same way as if you ask your parents. If you follow? I think it's a beautiful idea about the relationship between parents and children as opposed to... You follow? Okay. But in any event, the difference between a parent is really the primary connection to my Jewish roots. But in the absence of parents, I go to the elders.
Yeah.
You follow? Rabbi Sachs speaks many, many times about how Judaism is a family, like it's a family-based religion. This posuk would seem to strengthen that. Okay, so we looked at the two verses. We looked at a legal verse, more of a poetic verse. One is written in positive, one is written in the negative. Now I'd like to analyze. So what we're going to do is we're going to analyze both. The first one, and this is really something Zechariah picked up, is a very legal approach to the mitzvah of Channukah. I mean, it's the obvious answer. Nachon? How do we know that we are subservient to rabbinic authority? From the pasuk that says that we are subservient to rabbinic authority. Meaning, I don't know if you could say this, but like the obvious choice. You know, if I was to give you a Torah, and then give you an hour or 2 or 5, and tell you to find the pasuk, it's likely that this is the more obvious candidate, because it's, how do I know you're commanded? It's from the mitzvah that says you're commanded. So that first approach, I suppose, is the default approach. So we're going to explore that one, and I think, for me at least, that's the easier one to understand. The second pasuk is the chidush, the pasuk of Rabbi Nehemiah, taking not from a legal section of the Torah, but from a poetic section of the Torah. And as we will discover when we look at Rabbi Nehemiah, in the second part, I think it reflects a different approach to Channukah. Meaning, I think that the deeper we delve in Rabbi Nehemiah, because he's the one that's chosen not to choose a legal verse, you follow? The deeper we go to understand Rabbi Nehemiah, we understand Channukah on a deeper level as well. You follow? But I have to be quite honest, when I read, and we're going to look at some Chassidut to understand the position of Rabbi Nehemiah, because like what you were saying, it's like a deeper connect. It's not coming from a cold halachic approach to the festival, but it's coming from a place of, I want to commemorate the miracle, and I want to figure out how our family can do it, but it's not as structured halachically differently. You follow? So he goes to some very, very deep ideas in Chassidut, and I'm very excited that we're going to learn them together, because I hope that through our learning I will understand the ideas better. Is that okay? Okay, but we're going to start with the legal, that is the position of Rabbi Avia. So the Rambam in Hilchot Brachot, when he talks about where we have these commandments, he chooses, when he's teaching this, the question of how do we know we're commanded, he chooses the pasuk of Rabbi Avia, and he omits the pasuk of Rabbi Nehemiah, which will seem to indicate that Rambam believes that Rabbi Avia is right and Rabbi Nehemiah is not. You follow? So look in source number 4. V'chein, likewise, kol mitzvah she'hem midivrei sofrim, any rabbinic commandment, ben mitzvah shuhu chova midivreihem, kekol mikra megillah v'hadlakat ner Shabbat v'hadlakat ner Channukah, ben mitzvah she'enan chova, kekol eruv v'netilat yadayim, mevarech ala kol asher kshan mitzotav etzivanu. So he said, every mitzvah, whether it is purely from a rabbinic commandment, like lighting Channukah lights, or even the same question we can ask about reading the Megillah. You know, on Purim we're going to read the Megillah, we're going to make a bracha. You commanded us to read the Megillah, but God didn't command us to read the Megillah. The same question. When I wash my hands for Netilat Yadayim, like Idan did a few minutes ago, is that right? So Idan said, Asher Kishan Zivanu Al Netilat Yadayim. But God never commanded us to wash our hands for Netilat Yadayim. So the question, as I mentioned earlier, is much broader. So the Rambam, in this question of how do I know for every mitzvah that I say, that God sanctified us and commanded us to make this bracha, how do we ever know that we're commanded to do it? You follow? So he says over here, Vehechan sivanu b'Torah. Where did God command us in the Torah? Shekatuv ba asher yormu lecha ta'aseh. So where do the words asher yormu lecha ta'aseh, where do those words appear? If you have a look in source number 2, it is the pasuk of Rabbi Avia. Do you see? Al pi Torah asher yorucha, v'al mishpat asher yomru lecha ta'aseh, which is what the Rambam quotes, and then lo tasur min hadavar. Now we're going to discuss in a minute why the Rambam, in quoting the position of Rabbi Avia, chooses to quote a different part of the same pasuk. You follow? Yeah. Is he agreeing with Rabbi Avia that it's this pasuk, but arguing about the phrase, or is there something more going on over here? Do you see the Rambam is very precise. So it's interesting that the Rambam, in quoting the position of Rabbi Avia, does not quote the same part of the pasuk that Rabbi Avia quotes in the Gemara. Does everyone understand what I just said? Do you follow? Am I being clear? If I'm not, then I can work on that. Okay. Nimtza inyan advarim v'atzaan kachu asher kishan v'tzotav. Where did God command us? Because God commanded us to listen to the rulings of our rabbis. Shetzivanu ladlik ner shel Channukah. They commanded us, the rabbis commanded us to light the lights of Channukah, or to read the Megillah, and so too every other mitzvah. So how do we say the bracha of Asher Kiddishanu Mitzvotav V'Tzivanu that God commanded us? Because we're following the rabbis whose authority comes from this verse, Lo Tasur.
I have a question, Rob.
Yeah.
I think it was out of curiosity, because in a way, the Kohanim was in the beginning was commanded to observe the menorah in the temple. At the same time, you mentioned about the Netilat Yadayim was also commanded to them, and the fight in Channukah precisely was led by
Oh.
And the thing is, how with this transition from the Kohanim into the rest of Am Yisrael.
You mean generally? Why do we? Excellent question.
The beginning was just the light, it was only for Kohanim.
Nachon.
And only Kohanim, and then this passed to the rest of it.
Excellent question. Lovely. The truth is, there's a very, very interesting rabbi who lived at the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. His name was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is the visionary who, after the destruction of the Second Temple, and realized that the Jewish community here in the Holy City couldn't survive, took the community and he moved them nearer towards the coast to continue learning Torah elsewhere. This fascinating person, Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, was I was just trying to frame your question is part of a really fascinating responsibility that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had. He, immediately after the Second Temple, the Jewish people were in a real pickle. They were you don't need me to tell you that, but it was one of the scariest moments in Jewish history, destruction of the source of everything, and there was a real danger of chas v'shalom, sort of the end of the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. Now, because the end of the story, it's amazing that 2,000 years later we're here telling the story. Less than 2,000 years later, but we're here now, recounting. No, it was around 2000. Anyway, so Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, was in this really, really tricky place. And the tricky place he was, on the one hand, I want to mourn for the destruction of the temple because it's a painful thing to be. But on the other hand, if all we are as a nation mourning about the destruction, so then what's gonna lift us up? And therefore, he instituted many, many takanot in order to both mourn the destruction of the temple, but also at the same time and in parallel with it, sort of bring the temple into our lives today. Things like, we can't offer a korban, so let us read about the korbanot. We can't sacrifice, we can't serve in the Beit HaMikdash, let's all wash our hands for Netilat Yadayim. And Channukah lights as well. All of these rules created by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was in order to keep Jewish life alive. You know what I mean? Like Jewish culture, Jewish like a feeling. Jewish. You had to translate the Beit HaMikdash experience into a post Beit HaMikdash world. So I'm mourning, but I'm also taking from it, so that the flicker of light from the Beit HaMikdash will continue burning until it will be rebuilt. So all of these mitzvot, like washing our hands for Netilat Yadayim and Channukah lights, are all ways of keeping the Beit HaMikdash alive in our souls, so that we'll be ready when we will be rebuilt soon, Be'ezrat Hashem. And the amazing thing that we can say, looking back now, thousands of years later, is how correct Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai was. Because we cry and we feel the pain of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, but we are able to live these rich Jewish lives, even though the soul, like the essence of all of our Avodat Hashem, has been ripped away with the destruction of the temple, but he managed to navigate that. You follow? Okay, that was a long answer to a short question. But I think it's the right answer, I hope. Okay, so we looked at the Rambam. So the Rambam quoted a different part of the Pasuk. Now, if you look on the Rambam, there is a commentary in source number 5, the commentary on the Rambam, called the Kesef Mishnah. Does anyone here know who the Kesef Mishnah is? The Kesef Mishnah wrote another very famous book called the Shulchan Aruch. The Kesef Mishnah was written by a chap called Rav Yosef Karo, and he wrote commentaries on earlier Jewish legal works like the Mishneh Torah and on the Torah, and then afterwards he wrote the Shulchan Aruch based on the Torah. You follow? So let's read what the author of the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo, has to say on what we read in the Rambam. Ve'echan tzivanu b'Torah. So the Kesef Mishnah quotes the Gemara that we read. My mevarach hashek shanu tzadav tzivanu. Ve'echan tzivanu. Rabbi Avia amar milot asur. And then look at this. The Kesef Mishnah on the Rambam quotes Rabbi Nechemia amar sha'al avicha v'yaketcha zekeinecha v'yomer lach. V'katav Rabbeinu, meaning the Rambam, notice, the Kesef Mishnah tells us, Tamoshe Rabbi Avia Shuhu Nira Yoter. It seems, because the Rambam only quoted Rabbi Avia, and he didn't quote Rabbi Nehemiah, it seems that he, the Rambam, prefers the position of Rabbi Avia, Lo Tasur. V'od Amrinu Bivrachot, Kol Milta D'Rabbanan Asmucha Alav De Lo Tasur. Meaning, it's a bit like what Zechariah was saying earlier. The Gemara tells us anything that the rabbis enact for us is based on this verse of Lo Tasur, following the position of Rabbi Avia. So that's like the obvious choice. Okay, so we see the Rambam quotes only Rabbi Avia. The Kesef Mishnah deduces that the Rambam accepts Rabbi Avia and rejects Rabbi Nehemiah. Is that clear? And I just want to show you one beautiful thing that we can insert. I'm going to summarize it. It's source number 6. It's really, really a beautiful idea. It's very, very, very subtle. It's brilliant. It's a sort of idea that if any of you would think, it's such a clever idea because it's based on such a close reading of the Rambam. The source number 6 is from a book called the Torah Tamima. Torah Tamima was written by a chap called Rav Baruch Halevi Epstein, and he lived about just over 100 years ago. Now, I think that this chap, the Rav Baruch Halevi Epstein, was a businessman, but he, in his spare time, was involved in Torah study. And this book, the Torah Tamima, I don't know if any of you have ever learnt it. It is a commentary on the 5 books of the Torah. And what he does is, he takes a pasuk, and then on that pasuk, if there's a drasha anywhere in the Gemara, or sometimes from Midrashim as well, he'll then quote that drasha. And then in his comments, he explains that drasha. So it's quite a useful tool. I know when I was learning Gemara, if you're learning Gemara and there's a drasha, and you don't understand the drasha, so a good place to go to is a Torah Tamima, because he links, is really a link between the written Torah and the oral Torah. Because whenever a verse is quoted in the Gemara, he'll then quote the Gemara, just like the Gemara quotes a verse, so he starts with the verse and quotes the Gemara. You follow? It's like the flip side, and then he'll explain what it means. He explains the drasha. So on our verse, if you have a look over here, this is the Torah Tamima writing on the verse in Yud chapter 17. So when he got to this verse, he then quoted the Gemara that we read, and he said something very clever. Why is it that the Rambam, when the Rambam quotes Rabbi Avia, he quotes a different part of the pasuk? Nachon, Rabbi Avia says, how do we know that God commanded us to light Channukah lights? Asher kishanu lo tasur. Nachon, do not deviate. You follow? However, the Rambam doesn't use those words, lo tasur, but he quotes a different part of the pasuk. Asher yormu lecha ta'aseh. Nachon? You follow? Why is that the case? Is the question clear? Do you understand the question? Zachari, is that clear? Can I say it one more time? Is that okay? So, over here, if you look in the verse, is source number 2, the Torah tells us, Lo tasur, do not deviate. Nachon, do not deviate from that which God commands us to do. And the Gemara quotes those 2 words, Lo tasur. Lo tasur, in identifying this verse, source number 2, which is Devarim Yud Zayin Yud Aleph. So the Gemara identifies that pasuk using the words Lo tasur. The Rambam also wants to identify that pasuk as the basis, but he doesn't use those key words of Lo tasur, but rather at different words in the same verse that come previously. Asher yormu lecha ta'aseh. You follow? And I even underlined it in source number 4. And the question is, why does the Rambam, in quoting Rabbi Avia, why does he use different keywords to the words that Rabbi Avia used in the Gemara? You follow? So on that, the Torah Tamima answers. He says, even though that he agrees that that's the basis, however, what's the difference? Lo tasur is a negative commandment. You follow? Means don't do something. So you can't say, how do we know from the Torah that you are required to do something, and then quote a verse that says don't do something? You follow? So if you want to prove that we have to listen to the rabbis, so you have to have the words from the Vosuk that says listen, not don't do something. You follow? I think it's a very clever observation of the Torah Tumima, that the only way that I can know that I'm commanded to do something is if I use the words from the verse that say do something. But I can't learn that I'm required to do something and then quote from the verse the words that say you're not allowed to do something. You follow? Does that make sense? So therefore the Rambam quotes the positive part of the posset rather than the negative part, because that's from there you see that we're required to do something. Joy, happiness? Okay, we finished part 1. Any questions on part number 1? We see that this verse of Rabbi Avia is a very solid verse. The next time we wash our hands for Netilat Yadayim, you can say Asher Kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al Netilat Yadayim. You can say that with full energy, knowing now where God commanded us to wash our hands. Is that clear? Okay. Any questions on part 1? Well, that has to be one question, just one question. Any questions? That doesn't have to be, it's all right. If not, just say hello to Hanania. Hanania, how are you? Have you been here or have you been in Sderot? In the Dead Sea? Have you been in Yeshiva recently? Oh my gosh, to the Dead Sea?
No, all the name in the sea are transferred to Jerusalem Hotel.
Oh, amazing! Oh, so you're all in Jerusalem now?
Yeah, Grand Cohn Hotel.
Oh, amazing.
We once visit the English department with Rav Lisman. We go there.
Oh, that's amazing. Do you remember one time we were learning and you brought some friends from Sderot?
Yeah.
Amazing.
All of them are still there.
Amazing. And where are you living there, or you're?
Yeah, sometimes if they need help, I go and help them and then come back here.
Superstar you are. Amazing, amazing. Okay, so that is the first sort. That's Rabbi Avia. Now go to Rabbi Nehemiah. I have to say, Rabbi Nehemiah, I really would be very grateful for your help here. Because Rabbi Nehemiah, this really, I'm going to follow on very much from what Zechariah said before. Look at this. Zechariah got the Sfat Emet in a minute. Okay, if you have a look at the Chidushei HaRitzvah. The Ritzvah is a Rishon, one of the early rabbinic commentators, and he's commenting on the Gemara in Shabbat. Look what he says. Rav Nachman Amar, how do we know that we have to light Hanukkah candles? From Sha'al Avicha v'yagetcha, ask your father and he'll tell you. Zekenecha, your elders, v'yomerucha, and they will say. V'lo nichalei la'ansuba alav de lo tasur. And he doesn't want to use the more obvious, I would take the liberty of saying, the more obvious choice of using the legal source of Chanukah. Why? Now if you go to the end of what he says, Mishum Deshani Mitzvazu, the mitzvah of Chanukah is different. Oh, this is so hard to understand. She'ein la shum ikar min Torah. There's no hint, there's no reference to Chanukah in the Torah. Now, I want to discuss a little bit what Chanukah is, and then if we discuss a little bit what Chanukah is, after that, perhaps we'll come to understand better why Rabbi Nehemiah chose his pasuk. Okay, so the Gemara discusses Chanukah. I just want to preface reading the Gemara with one observation about the miracle of Chanukah, the miracle of the lights, that I think is probably different to, I don't know, almost every other miracle that we experience. And that is that, let's say Kriyat Yamsuf, when the sea split and we went free. So that miracle saved our lives. We were being chased by the Egyptians. The sea split, and then we were able to cross, like onto dry land. You follow? I don't know. Every other festival that we celebrate because we were in a pickle. Purim, Nachon Haman wanted to destroy us. There was a big miracle, and we were saved. We would commemorate that by celebrating Purim. But on Channukah, let's say they went to look for Channukah lights, look for oil, and they didn't find any oil. So it wouldn't be great, but they wouldn't light for 8 days. Or let's say they found a crude of oil, and it lasted for 1 day, and then for 7 days they waited until it was lit. It's not ideal, because unfortunately, during the time that the Greeks were occupying the Second Temple, the menorah wasn't lit any day. So it's not like it had been lit continuously without a break. When the Greeks were running the show, they weren't lighting the menorah every single day. So the fact that the menorah wasn't lit was bad, but it's not terrible. And then if we wouldn't have found oil, okay, so we wouldn't find oil. And if we would have lit oil and it would have lasted for 1 day, so then it would have lasted for 1 day. But the miracle that caused it to last for 8 days is amazing, but didn't save anybody's lives. It was remarkable. But it's like I don't want to minimize it, but it's not a miracle that people go, wow, like I'm now, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's not like the Har Sinai experience or some other. No lives were saved as a result of this miracle. You follow? It was amazing that it lasted for 8 days. But had it gone out, that wouldn't have been terrible. I mean, it would have been terrible, but not terrible. You follow what I mean? Now, in light of how I'm describing the miracle of the oil, that really is the big deal. That's why we light the Channukah every night. I want to read how the Gemara describes it. Look at this in source number 8. My Channukah. What is Channukah? The Tanu Rabbanon, our rabbis taught. B'kafei b'Kislev, on the 25th of Kislev, which is next Thursday night, Be'ezrat Hashem. So on the 25th of Kislev, Yomei de Channukah, Tamne Inun. They are 8 days. So on 25th of Kislev start the 8 days of Channukah. Delo lemisper bahon, you can't have eulogies. Or delo lehit anot bahon, you're not allowed to fast on these days. Now why? K'shenichnesu Yevanim laheichal. When the Greeks entered the sanctuary of the Beit HaMikdash, Tim'u kol hashmanim, they impurified all of the oil. Ukeshekavra malchut beit Chashmonai v'nitzchum, and then when the family of the Chashmonaim were victorious in battle, Badku, they searched, v'lo matzu, and they didn't find, they only found pach echad shel shemen. They found 1 cruse of oil. I hope so far I'm not saying anything that you didn't know already. But this is the story. This is every other rendering of the story is from here. You follow? Okay. Shaya munach b'chotamo shel Cohen Gadol, had the seal of the high priest. V'lo haya bo ela lahadlik yom echad. It would only last for 1 day. Na'asa bo nes, a miracle happened. V'idliku mimenu shmona yamim, and it lasted for 8 days. You hear that? Is that story clear? Now, I would expect that at that stage of the story, everybody's going to go, oh, wow, that was amazing. Let's make a festival. And we'll light Channukah lights every night. However, look at the last, what happens right after that? L'shana acheret. Does anyone know what the word shana acheret means? Next year. Well, or another year, but we'll say a year later. So in other words, it lasted for 8 days, and that was great. And then the following day, they had enough on, they continued lighting, and then nothing happened for a year. Then the following year, a year later, a year after the miracle happened, L'shana acheret kav'um, it was fixed, V'asa'um yamim tovim b'halel v'hoda'ah. They became a day of festival, b'halel, with praise, v'hoda'ah, and gratitude. Okay. Is that clear to everybody? Okay. It's an interesting depiction of this incredible, important chag that we're gonna celebrate together, Bezrat Hashem, next week. But it's not it's not described as a miraculous, like everyone sort of like got blown away sort of thing. The following year, the next year, they celebrated it. Okay. Is that clear? That's a Gemara. In light of that Gemara, I'd like to learn two sources with you. The first one, the Sfat Emet, as Zechariah will tell you, is a very deep and a very difficult, but a very satisfying book, written just over 100 years ago. Do you see that? It was written Tov, Reish, Lamed, Gimel, which is, it's a bit more than 100 years ago, like 150 years ago. Tov, Reish, Lamed, Gimel is 1873. So he wrote this in 1873. It was the second Rebbe of Gur, and he's talking about Channukah. But we're going to read what he writes about Channukah, and then in the following source called the Tiferet Shlomo, we're going to use that idea from the Sfat Emet to understand the Tiferet Shlomo and to link that to the verse of Rabbi Nehemiah, which really very much connects to what Zechariah was alluding to earlier about the Chanukah is something else. It's mamash, a very, very deep, deep holy day, and it's not. I'm not lighting because I'm commanded to. I'm lighting because I need to. You follow? Okay, now look at this. So the Sfat Emet, it says lots of other things over here, but we're going to have to go very slowly. Timur kol hashmanim, the Greeks impurified all the oil. Af shenishar pachachad, and even though there was one left over. Okay, now I just want to make one point. How is it if the Greeks, they were there for 50 years, sort of causing absolute havoc in the Beit HaMikdash, and they destroyed every cruse of oil, and then the Jews come in, and then in the first day they find one that the Greeks missed. Now, how is that even possible? That they walked in, they never saw it. They walked there and back, like hundreds and hundreds of times, and they never saw it. And then the Jews did see it. You follow? So how did that happen? So there is an idea that many Hasidic Rebbes talk about, and the Sfat Emet expands on it too. It's a very, very deep, deep, holy idea. It is such a special idea. And that is that when you're looking for something, so you can find it. So if I'm blessed with eyes of holiness, so when I walk into the room, so then I can see holiness, because that's what I'm looking for it. You follow? But if you walk into a room and you're not looking for it, so then you won't see it. Does that make sense to you? I'll give you a terrible, terrible analogy. I don't even need the analogy, but I'll just say it anyway. Little things. Let's say you wear glasses, right? So then, let's say you wear glasses for the very first time. You never wore glasses, and then you start wearing glasses. The first day you wear glasses, you notice who else wears glasses. You know what I mean? Like, you could be sitting in the same room with 1,000 other people, but because I'm looking for the glasses, I'll see them. But no one else will see them because no one else is looking for them. So the Greeks didn't see because the Greeks didn't know what they were looking for. You follow? But the holy Yidden that came into the Beit HaMikdash were looking for Kedusha. You follow? They were looking with eyes to destroy, and we were looking for eyes to dedicate, to make holy. So that's all the difference. You follow? It's all about what you're looking for. Atem shomim et zeh? Okay, so that's like a basis for this Sfat Emet over here. So listen what he says now. Pach zeh, this one cruse of oil, remez, is a hint. Shel olam nish'ar nekuda b'Yisrael, asher HaKadosh Baruch Hu magin aleh, shelo yesham maga nochri, v'al zeh namar magin Avraham. He says, even in the worst situations for the Jewish people, God will always maintain like that, like the essence of holiness. You follow? Even in the darkest, most difficult places, and imagine the experience for the Chashmonaim to recapture the Beit HaMikdash and to enter it after it's been desecrated by these terrible enemy. You follow? But God would never allow everything to be destroyed. There's always going to be like a glimmer of hope, a glimmer of light. And that's what they found, because they knew it would be there, so they knew they would find it. You follow? Okay. Okay, I'm gonna. Okay, Rak. This Nakuda, he's talking about this thing that you're looking for, this essence, even this glimmer of hope, we'll call it. This Nakuda, tzricha chipus al yedei she'adam ma'amin sheyesh b'chol davar Nakuda genuza v'chofes b'kol kocho nimtzeit lo kol kach batko v'lo matzu rak pach echad michlal she'tzricha chipus. He says, this in order to find this glimmer of hope, it will only be found, the glimmer of hope will only be found by somebody who truly believes that it's there. You follow? And they'll use all of their energy to try and find it. Okay, is everything clear until now? It's really, we said it outside and we read it inside. Now, he takes this to a stage. I really need your help to understand the next bit. V'zeh atzmo neirot Channukah. He says that is the message of the Channukah lights. Shemeirin, because they light up. Shenuchal. Do you know what they light up? Shenuchal limtzo nekuda hagnuza. The Channukah lights are like a torch or a flashlight to shine on each other, to be able to see the goodness in one another. You follow? Like the Channukah lights are a flashlight. Me'irin, they light up in order to see the Nekudah HaGenuza, which we're calling the glimmer of hope. Ki kamochen bekalut ze nimtza nekudah HaGenuza shelo nitmet. That this glimmer of hope in every one of us never became impure, like it stayed holy. V'chein benefesh kol Yisrael, and so too in the souls of each of us. Yesh nekuda nishmat eloka mimal. Each one of us has this glimmer of hope, or this heavenly soul. V'amitzvot hem neirot shenuchal limtzoa hanekuda. And each mitzvah is like a candle that shines on it in order to be able to see it. Okay, I'm going to go to the penultimate line. Bizman during these days of Channukah, sheyesh mitzvah b'neirot, that we have this mitzvah of lighting up. You light something up when you're looking for something. You follow? So on Channukah, when we have this mitzvah of lighting up, niftachim kol advarim shenikraim neirot. Everything that's candles are opened up. Kikenahem inyan mitzvah shekol davar sheyesh bo achiza b'mitzvah b'shem zeh o b'remez yesh lo aliyah al yedei mitzvah. V'zeh she'amar durushim l'chol cheftzeihem. That you have to search in all of your property. So the lights of Channukah are a flashlight, and each light it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, because each day we see clearer and clearer and clearer this glimmer of hope inside ourselves, inside the people around us, inside the world, because God would never allow it all to disappear. You follow? Those are the words of the Baal Sfat Emet. They are absolutely amazing. Okay, Joy, I think you can see where we're going. According to the Rabbi Nehemiah, Channukah lights is just somewhere else. You know what I mean? It's not just like a mechanical action. It's a deep avoida. It's hard work. I'm not like when I wash my hands before Netilat Yadayim. So I'm facilitating my ability to have bread. my hands are pure, I can have the bread. It's like a technical solution to the problem of how can I touch the bread? Wash your hands and I can touch the bread. You follow? But here we're going, it's not just a technical, I don't know what the word is, like a solution to some problem. We're not commemorating a miracle, because as we saw in the Shana Cheret, but we're recreating the Chanukah experience. Like we're tapping into that light, but it's a different level of mitzvah. You follow that? And that's why the verse that we would normally use of Lot Asur isn't applicable here. We're going to go to the Sha'al Avicha. You follow? Now that's what the final source, Tiferet Shlomo. This is what he says. Channukah hu hit orarut haor harishon. On Channukah, we are tapping into the original light. V'lachen na'asu hanisim b'yamim hahem bazman hazeh. And so, therefore, the miracles happened in those days and in ours. Misha anisim lavotin v'chein amru b'gemara. Heichan sivanu. Do you see this in the second line of source number 10? Where did God command us to light Chanukah lights? Umeshani. And the Gemara tells us, Sha'al avicha v'yagetcha zekenecha v'yomulach. Ask your father and he'll tell you, and your elders they'll say to you, Hinei, Ein lahavin tirutz hazeh. It's hard to understand this because that's not a legal source. Ella, what does it mean? Me'hechan nogeh hatzivui v'ha'era shel mitzvat ner Chanukah. Meaning, where does the power of this mitzvah come from? Like the technical command to do God's will is from Lot Asur. But how do I know about the power of the Nerot Chanukah? Like the essence of the Nerot Chanukah. Not the command to light, but like where's the power? That comes from the ancient story. You follow? Okay, I'm just going to add one more thing. For that you have to ask your parents. Okay. Now I want to add one piece to the Tiferet Shlomo that will really be mashlim. Why did they wait till the next year? Like what happened? What were they doing during that year? So the Baal Sfat Emet elsewhere explains something absolutely amazing. What happened is like this. On the 25th of Kislev, in the year of Chanukah, they lit the menorah for one day, and then it lasted another day, and another day, and another day. It lasted for 8 days. You follow? So that is amazing. We're done. Like many miracles that happened in the Beit HaMikdash. You know, there was meat never went off in the Beit HaMikdash, but we don't have a festival to commemorate the fact that the meat never went off. The Beit HaMikdash was very full. You know, if people were standing and then they would all bow down, it was squashed when they were standing, and then they would bow down and there would be lots of room. That's a miracle, but we don't have a festival to commemorate that. There were many miracles. So the Chashmonaim saw this miracle and said, another great Beit HaMikdash miracle. But then, listen to this, this is amazing. The Jewish year went round, it was like Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar, went past Pesach, then they had Shavuot, then they had Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, and then they came to the following year on the 25th of Kislev. And then the Cohn comes to light the menorah. Exactly a year later, and it's, whoa, my gosh. And he realized this light is not just the light that we have every day. We tapped into a light last year that we've never tapped into before. You follow? He understood that this isn't just any old light. This is the light that we were reading about just now in the Sfat Emet, and then in the Tiferet Shlomo. This is a light that allows us to see stuff that we don't normally see. Like the light of the guy that's wearing glasses. So the light of being able to walk into a place of destruction that was destroyed by the Greeks for years upon years, and to walk straight in and to see a crude of oil, that light, to see the glimmer of that ability to see the glimmer of hope, or to see this nekudah that normally you can't see. They realized that on the 25th of Kislev, it wasn't just that it lasted 8 days. They realized that a new type of light was created. You follow? And then the following year they said, we have to light this light every year. And that's how the festival of Channukah was created. And then each year when we light ours, we're recreating that light from that original year that only a year later did they realize was miraculous. Isn't that brilliant? Oh, shkoyach. So we can conclude, sweet, wonderful people, Rabbi Avia and Rabbi Nehemiah agree that where we commanded, how do we say God commands us? For every mitzvah, we learn from Lo Tasur. Nachon, do not deviate from that which the rabbis taught us. However, there's something more going on here on Chanukah. I'm not just doing it because of Lo Tasur, but there's this deeper connection to tapping into an energy that was created on that first year, that only the following year they realized that they had that ability to see stuff that we can't see for the rest of the year. I mean, please God, we will be able to see it, and then once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. But where our eyes are opened on Chanukah, the Chanukah lights are a flashlight to shine on the world and to allow us to see these nikudot. So I want to bless us all as we conclude. We shall have the energy, the power, and the zechut when we light our Chanukah candles, not just to light them following the position of Rabbi Avia and doing it kihilchata, as it's supposed to be done, but also following Rabbi Nehemiah and getting to the depth of this holy mitzvah. Yishar koach lechem. It is kula mitzvot.